San Jose, California. And but before we get started, I got cut off last week because of some emergency, and we were looking at a question from Adwai Krishna, and he was asking something about uh, loneliness and isolation, and I thought, well, that's particularly interesting, isn't it? Because all of us are kind of in our own little separate worlds. We come together for a Zoom class or something like this, but Adwai is located in Cooley, Ireland, which is about as far away from civilization as you could possibly be. It's wonderful. It's really beautiful. Uh, there's this rocky coast. There's an old song by Pentangle called Cruel Sister. I suppose it's Scottish, not Irish, but it's about these two sisters, and one of them throws the other one off into a rocky coast where she drowns. Later, the musicians use her bones to construct a Celtic harp and sing her sad song. And I think of somewhere like Cooley, uh, that comes to mind, you know. So for solitude and loneliness, I don't think you can beat Cooley, Ireland and Northern Ireland and that dark, rocky coast and the serious, heavy waves. Like, for example, here in Mexico, if you're in Merida or Cancun, the ocean is very inviting. It's a sort of an aqua turquoise blue, palm trees. It's all very beautiful. But the rugged beauty of Ireland is kind of a different thing altogether. So he posed this question about solitude and loneliness, and it's something we don't really discuss very often, but uh, I think this can be an issue for many devotees because you may be cut off from your happy association there in Navadvip Dham or in Vrindavan, where every word is a song and every movement is dance, and there's happy devotees chanting Hare Krishna and doing kirtan. Sometimes we're sort of stuck in the world, as it were, surrounded by folks who don't share our point of view. And in that sense, we face a certain amount of disconnection. And I think loneliness, the idea of loneliness is it's sort of a feeling of being disconnected, of not being with the people who we really want to be with, or being surrounded by folks who have a completely different take on life, a different point of view. And so that feeling of disconnection can be very dangerous and damaging because at some point uh, we just feel like there's no meaningful relationship going on. We're disconnected from reality. So I was thinking about this, uh, the relationship between loneliness and solitude. Because if you look at, say, for example, the ancient desert fathers of Egypt, Saint Anthony of Egypt lived about 1500 years ago. And in the very early days of sort of the Christian Catholic uh, movement around the teachings of Jesus Christ, there were those who felt that they had to isolate themselves completely from the materialistic society of Kali Yuga that even then was uh, prevalent. So St. Anthony, he read this bit somewhere in the Gospels where Christ says, um, if you really believe in God, then you should give up everything you have and sell all you have to the poor and come and follow me. So, of course, we kind of take this as the position of the renunciant. He's really emblematic of that. So he goes off into the desert and lives alone in a cell until some disciples come searching for him, thinking this man is really a saint. And so when they come searching for him, he goes even farther out into the desert so he can live alone. And I mention this because it seems that in the monastic movement, uh, there's a certain virtue to solitude. And there's a dichotomy then between solitude and loneliness, because loneliness is the feeling that you're disconnected, but solitude means, you're living apart. Or is it possible to be in solitude, even in a crowd? Is it possible to be lonely, even in a crowd? So these are questions that came to mind after uh, I spoke with Adwai last week. And this St. Anthony and there's a series of so-called desert fathers who lived out in the desert outside Jerusalem thousands of years, hundreds of years ago, anciently. Uh, and they have these strange teachings about humility, oddly enough. We have Trinadapi Sunicena Tarorapi Suhishnuna. Uh, and they would ask him, you know, what can you teach me? And he would tell them something like, well, go out into the desert alone, and your own solitude will teach you. So while being disconnected is very difficult, um, on the other hand, solitude can teach us something. And if you don't understand solitude, if you're not able to be alone by yourself, um, then how can you know yourself? So it's thanks to solitude that I can know myself. Uh, Solitude can be healthy because it allows you time for self-reflection. And today, in our accelerated world where we're surrounded by constant, oh, cell phones, even now, Zoom class, uh, electronic invasion from all sides, uh, we're sort of being propagandized to avoid solitude. People don't, the powers that be, if you like, the agents of Kali, they don't really like when you think. If you take time for yourself to self-reflect. So the idea is to maintain everyone in a constant state of panic and fear and stimulation. So that actually solitude can be very healthy because it allows you self-reflection. On the other hand, you might be overstimulated and surrounded by people and so-called friends who are providing excitement and emotion and thrills, but even in the midst of that, you may feel terribly alone. Then again, loneliness and boredom, in a sense, they're kind of in Zen, they have this idea of emptiness. And I never liked that. Uh, I prefer the idea of rasa. But the Chinese are very big on that, so are the Japanese. And their idea is that, say you have a, a pot, right? The important thing about the pot is the emptiness inside it. Because without that, uh, there's no chance of usefulness. It's the emptiness in the pot that makes it useful. So boredom and loneliness are very painful, and we don't like it. We try to fill up our hours with fun stuff and excitement and thrills, chills, spills. But without that quietness, without that emptiness, if you like, uh, without loneliness, um, you won't be able to come to the point of complete self-reflection. And so I actually wrote something about this. And Tapanandini, she might recognize Facundo Cabral. He was an Argentinian, uh, kind of a Bob Dylan of Argentina, if you like. And he started out as a street busker playing his guitar in the street, and someone discovered him. But he had an odd take on things. And he has a talk called No estás deprimido, estás distraído. You're not depressed, you're distracted. And once when I was a bit depressed and feeling lonely and distracted, I sort of borrowed a bit from what he said and kind of did a loose translation poem. And so I'll just read a little bit of this. Uh, you'll see how it connects, okay? Uh, so this is really addressed to, nominally, this is being addressed to Advai Krishna Prabhu, but this is really addressed to anyone who feels lonely. Just hang on. I don't know what happened to my, I heard, okay. This is called, You're Not Depressed, You're Distracted. You're not depressed. You can't be depressed. You're distracted. You're not paying attention. You forgot who you are. You say you don't believe that every wave is favorable. You think it's all darkness and disaster, but just look at the life that surrounds you, the beauty that fills your day. Look at the flowering trees, the vast oceans, the purple mountains, the flowing rivers. You've forgotten how much this world is full of wonder. Every wave is favorable. You don't believe me, maybe. Maybe you're under the influence. Or maybe your brother or your sister fell into a blind dream of darkness and misery and you want to follow them. But don't fall for it. Maybe you think you're alone in the world. You're not alone. You forget. There's billions of souls in this world. There's life everywhere you look. Hundreds of millions of souls surround you, and the plants, and the motes of dust, even the air that you breathe. The soul is everywhere. Each one a reflection of life, each one a miracle. How can you say there are no miracles when you are a living, breathing miracle? Your sight is a miracle. With all our science, we can't create something as simple as the living eye of a honeybee. You're surrounded by miracles. You're not alone. But then again, even if you are alone, there's nothing wrong with being alone. In solitude, we find the strength to create and the inspiration to find God, to continue the search for Sri Krishna, reality, the beautiful. In solitude, there is serenity. It allows us to choose how we are to think and reflect, to discover who we are and what we want. There's nothing wrong with being alone. In the quiet of solitude, we can discover the reality of every moment. And in that quiet, I can know myself. You can know yourself. And knowing yourself, that's essential to truly live. The Greek philosopher said, know thyself. You're not depressed. You're distracted. You're thinking you're tired and depressed because you're old. Don't fall into the same trap as your father, who believed he was old just because he turned 70. You forget that Bhaktivedanta Swami crossed the ocean in a tramp steamer and brought the Bhagavad Gita to New York when he was 70. Moses led his people to the promised land when he was 80. Arthur Rubinstein played the most complex and heartfelt pieces of Chopin better than anyone else when he was in his 90s. You're not depressed. You're distracted. And because of that, you believe you've lost something, but that's impossible. How can you lose anything when you own nothing? You come into this world with nothing and you leave it with nothing. Everything you have has been given to you. You didn't even create a single strand of hair on your own head. Everything you have is a gift. There can be no loss. The Upanishad says, Ishavashyamidam sarvam yat kinsha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bunjita magrida kasyasvidhanam. Everything animate or inanimate within this universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota. And one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. Nothing belongs to you. How could you truly lose anything? Life doesn't take from you. Life sets you free. It lightens your load so you can fly higher, so you can grow, so you can become more. Find yourself. Seek out your higher light. Remember, we are all children of the spiritual sky, sons and daughters of nectar. We were born in nectar. We were born for eternal life. We're not meant for anything less than an eternal life of positive and progressive immortality in the nectar of divine love. You're not depressed. You just forgot who you are. You're distracted. You've given your attention to trivialities. You haven't paid attention. Remember, from birth to death, every life is an education. We're in school here to learn something valuable. Every wave is favorable. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. This goes on, but I'm supposed to be reading from The Loving Search. The point there is, the point there is, uh, there's different kinds of solitude also. There's the solitude that we create for ourselves by identifying ourselves in a certain way. So you're a follower of Manchester United, but you're stuck in a football game where Dynamo, the famous Ukrainian team, is defeating Manchester United, and you're surrounded by fans of Dynamo or Dynamo, I guess. Right? Is that the name of the team? Dynamo? You know that? No, sorry, yeah. So say you're a big Manchester United fan, but you're surrounded by fans of some other team. You feel cut off, disconnected, lonely. But this is a false identification. Uh, we identify as men, and we feel our ego insulted by the woman we love because she's demanding that you take out the trash, and you're trying to chant 16 rounds of japa. And she's thinking, well, taking out the trash, this is more sacred than what you're doing. So, because of all these false identifications and our, our connection with a false ego, uh, we feel disconnected. And that's where our loneliness comes from. But in solitude, also, we can discover our connection with Krishna. So we have to find some solitude in order to take the holy name. I don't know. Is that an okay answer, Adwai? You know, it's if somebody asks me a question, I have to consider it, you know, carefully, because these are questions which are problematic for all of us, as I said before. Anyways, so I don't want to get too far away from our reading, but we were talking about, I was talking about, Saint Anthony in the desert. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj is describing here uh, the nature of renunciation. He says both enjoyment and renunciation are abnormal. So the kind of extreme renunciation that was practiced by Saint Anthony in the desert, it may lead to a particular type of enlightenment, but uh, this kind of enlightenment is superficial because it avoids the innate identity of the soul as swarup. So both enjoyment and renunciation are abnormal. There are two kinds of demons. This is really interesting coming from Srila Sridhar Maharaj because he was very renounced. Enjoyment or exploitation and eternal rest or renunciation. These two tendencies are our enemies. So for me, the first time I heard him say this, I thought, well, how can he say that? Aren't we all about, renunciation and sannyas and all? A higher positive life is possible only when we become fully independent of both exploitation and renunciation. Everything will help us if we can see it in connection with the center. So this is the key point here. On the other hand, the kind of exclusive renunciation practiced by Shankarites and Buddhists is not recommended for our line. So in Kali Yuga especially, renunciation is very difficult. You look at the life of any great renunciate and put it under a microscope, and you'll find anomalies. It's not recommended. We are concerned to harmonize things so that everything will remind us of our duty towards the Absolute and encourage us to dedicate ourselves to Him. So then he quotes from Srila Rupa Goswami, Prapanchikataya buddhya hari sambandhi vashtuna mumukshubi paritrago vairagyam falgu katyate. So this is a verse about renunciation from Srila Rupa Goswami, but what he's talking about here is Falgu Vairagya, and that means false renunciation. And I looked at Srila Prabhupada's comment on this. He comments in the 8th canto. He says, Srila Rupa Goswami instructs, Prapanchikataya buddhya hari sambandhi vashtuna. The body fully engaged in Krishna's service should not be neglected as material. One who does neglect it is false in his renunciation. So, for example, at one point, Sanatana Goswami tells Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he says, "I'm so fallen. I don't know how I can. I don't know how I can go on. This body of mine is so contaminated. The only solution I can find is self-destruction. I want to commit suicide." And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu points out, he says, well, you're a Brahmin. If you kill yourself, you would be guilty of killing a Brahmin. You know? So if one engages in self-destruction in the Vaishnava community, you would be guilty of killing a Vaishnava, which is even worse than killing a Brahmana. So Rupa Goswami is saying this body, which is apparently full of, bile and stool and foul elements, blood, mucus, uh, it's especially important because it's favorable to the service of Krishna. So if something is being used in the service of Krishna, you can't renounce that. It's not a good plan. This is Rupa Goswami's conclusion. One who rejects things without knowledge of the relationship to Krishna is incomplete in his renunciation. Prapanchikataya buddhya hari sambandhi vashtuna mumukshubhi parityago vairagyam falgu katyate. The body fully engaged in Krishna's service should not be neglected as material. When the body is engaged in the service of the Lord, it's not material. He, he says if the body is not properly maintained, it falls down and dries up like an uprooted tree, from which flowers and fruit can no longer be obtained. So this is kind of an interesting verse because he's telling you, take care of yourself. Don't neglect your health. Don't neglect your teeth. This kind of renunciation is false. It's external. It doesn't get to the heart of who we are as servants of Krishna. You need your teeth to serve Krishna. I say this because I just had a couple of teeth removed a couple of weeks ago because when I was a young brahmachari, I ate a lot of sweets and I didn't take care of my teeth. So there's nothing wrong then with taking care of your teeth, your body, your family. It doesn't mean if you take good care of your children and your wife that you're somehow betraying the Krishna consciousness movement. And sometimes our god brothers, especially if they're trying to maintain an ashram, they need resources for that ashram. So they want your help, your money, whatever you can offer. Uh, but take care of yourself. It's an interesting message from Srila Rupa Goswami. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj continues. Uh, he's finishing the rest of this thought from Rupa Goswami. He says, Anasaktasya vishayan yatartam upayunshitaha nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagyam uchite. This is a very, very famous verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, explaining the nature of vairagya or renunciation properly. He says, to neglect the environment, thinking that it is filled with undesirable material things, won't help us. That is not correct. Everything within the environment should remind us of the absolute. In that spirit, we should move, thinking, accept me and connect me with the service of our Lord. When the environment is seen with the correct vision, everything will help encourage and excite us in our service to the center. We are living in an organic whole, a system, and that system is composed of the owner and the owned, the possessor of the potency and the different types of potency, Shakti, Shaktiman. The Lord's potency is dynamic, and that dynamism is always producing rasa, or the flavor of ecstasy. The whole thing is producing ecstasy. Krishna himself is the emporium of rasa. Dynamic movement is a necessity in his lila. It is not static, but dynamic, filled with movement. And that movement is pratipadam purnamritas vadanam. At every point, at every step, it produces a new type of joy, which is infinite. So here he's contrasting uh, ordinary sense pleasure with ananda, which is the kind of infinite joy that one will experience in Krishna's service. This is the proper conception of the absolute. The organic whole, which is always working and moving, is full, and its fullness is ever new. So, Srila Sridhar Maharaj is pointing out that the environment is not our enemy. If everything comes from God, how could it be evil? Good and evil, in a sense, are sort of uh, moralistic terms invented by human civilization for a particular purpose, the Manu Samhita, to govern, to control society. Uh, but in the ultimate analysis, every wave is favorable. The infinite is your friend. So you can look at the world around you and the people around you and think, this is all Kali Yuga, they're all demons. But this will produce a sort of hateful cult mentality, which will not promote harmony. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj is saying, real Krishna consciousness means living in harmony. So I don't really want to go on and on and on because I will bore everybody to death. I can see Nazar is scratching his head and he's going, "Oh God, oh my God," But how can you look at war, and you think, how can God allow this? You know, it's a terrible thing. But who invented God invent war? Not so much. Really, it's kind of a human thing. You have, I want. Give me, give me, give me. No. Okay, we're going to fight. So there's war. But the idea of good and evil in that sense, it's kind of a construct. Uh, the plants, the flowers, right? When the flowers see a lion, they see a friend. When the flowers see a deer, they see an enemy because the deer is going to eat the flowers. Where the lion, he's going to eat the deer. So the lion is the friend of the flowers. So this idea that, well, the lion is bad because he's ferocious and he's going to eat me, and the deer is the friend, these things take on a sort of a relative aspect. But in considering the nature of the infinite, we should consider that every wave that emanates from the infinite is favorable, but we don't always see it. As Facundo Cabral put it, no estás deprimida, estás distraída. You can't you can't understand things perfectly, but uh, the problem is not in our stars, but in ourselves. So I don't really like to preach a sermon so much. I like I like to read, but what Srila Sridhar Maharaj says, it's not that it's hard to understand, it's that it's dense. It's very thick with meaning. What does it mean that every wave is favorable? How do I practice that? And as someone who worked to publish his books, and I try to continue to sort of promote his ideas. Uh, I always have to take a step back and think, well, what does that really mean? What does that mean for me? What's my realization? And I avoid telling people, how many rounds of Hare Krishna mantra they should chant or the best way to observe Ekadashi, because I'm still struggling with this idea that every wave is favorable. So that's a good 40-minute section piece. What is that? Live long and prosper. The other day, I saw somebody on the internet, some Indian man, but and the West, they had the worst time trying to take India seriously, and they still do. They refuse to take India seriously because of Hinduism. They're like, "Ooh, that's weird. You have 10,000 gods, and we don't understand that." Um, but strangely, India produces the best mathematicians, the best physicists, like the Higson Bose particle, whatever that is. It's named after Bose, who's an Indian man. Jagadish Chandra Bose was a great Indian scientist. There are all these brilliant Indian mathematicians, scientists, engineers, you know, uh, but sometimes folks get a little shy about expressing an interest in Shiva, Krishna, Durga, Ganesh. And so I saw this one man, he said, I've renounced the Hinduism, and now I am a fan of Star Wars, and for me, Star Wars is my religion, you know. So everyone has their own mythology. I have mine. Uh, anyways, any questions, comments? Tell me how I'm wrong, and then I'll go back and like Adwai last week. He said, all right, that's all good. That's fine. But what about loneliness? Hmm? Like, wow, that's a big one. So I'm reading this guy, Ivan Illich or Ivan Illich, who I used to hate, because I would read, he has this book called Deschooling Society, and I'm a teacher. And you read that and you go, what? And his point is the schools are the worst thing there are. There's nothing worse. Like, what? How is that? How could he think that? So, I read this like 35 years ago and put it away, just thinking, I don't know. I don't get it. But then I'm coming back to reading him years later, and he has this interesting position. He's pointing out that there are all these different systems that are the basic idea is they're a tool to get something else, like transportation. Uh, is to get you from point A to point B. So now we have this tremendous, great transportation system. But what happens is the real purpose of the system is the system. The real purpose of the transportation system is that it will continue as it is. So you will buy more cars, use more gasoline, and then suddenly you find yourself uh, having to drive 3 or 4 hours every day within that system. So the purpose of the system is no longer to get from point A to point B. The purpose is to keep that system going. I thought that was an interesting perception. He pointed out that people in Mexico now, uh, they prefer to walk to work. And I do that. Uh, I walk to work every day. It's 20 minutes. I see people walking around with their cell phones, children playing, it rains a little bit. There's a dog. They're working on the street. And I arrive at my work by walking. It's good exercise, right? Whereas someone else they have to spend 2 hours to get to work and back so they can work hard and make money so they can afford a car and put gasoline in the car. So the point of the system is to continue the system. So he says that about education as well. The point of schooling people is that you will need more schooling. The point of a hospital is to keep you in the medical system. Very interesting thinking. So I underestimated that. I forget why I mentioned uh, Ivan
I
Illich.
would like to make some comment about beauty, Mahayogi.
Go ahead, make a comment.
Well,
Let me finish my thought.
yesterday I discovered something that I have never seen before. I thought I have seen everything, but then suddenly I discovered this beautiful fish, and it turned me back to understand that we are surrounded by so much beauty. This beautiful fish is called the moonfish or the sunfish. And I was unable to think, what am I going to paint or work on next? Because I feel no inspiration. I feel very bad. I feel very tired because I've been a little bit sick. So I saw this beautiful animal. He se acuesta. How you say? He lay down on the sea and let the birds to feed from him. Even he doesn't reject being feeding the birds or whatever. He is so peaceful. He only eats plankton and medusas, and he is so beautiful. So now I am embroidering this beautiful fish
Okay.
that makes me think about there is so much beauty that we have to embrace. That's all I want to say, Mahayogi.
You have to understand what she's showing you is just a brief sketch. Tapanandini is an accomplished artist, and the finished the finished piece might be much more than that. But
Oh
it's
yes,
very
I
difficult.
am embroidering this. I am
Yeah.
embroidering this, Mahayogi.
Oh, that's embroidery. Okay. Is that the sketch or is that the embroidery?
Well,
Is
I
that's your
maybe
d
if I put it like this, you see, I am just start
Oh,
working
okay.
in it. It is a long way to go. It is over paper. I am embroidering paper, not
Okay.
material. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't
Tapanandini,
bore Pranashit.
you have to keep in mind it's difficult for artists to show their work when it's unfinished because people will look at that and go, "Oh, that looks unfinished," but that she's sharing that with us as a tribute to her creative brilliance. Uh, Pranashish is also doing some painting, I understand. How's it going?
Good.
All right. And so, Adwai, do you feel any better?
Yeah, yeah, no, no, it's all right. Thanks for thinking about the point that we were discussing last week, for having put your time and your attention to it, and yeah,
The thing is, as this is a sort of a sangha, I depend on you to help me get through my loneliness and solitude. And I don't want to lose you. So I have to think, well, do I need here? What do I need? And maybe that's the same thing. So, uh, all right, I'm going to end this meeting because I have some things I have to take care of. But um, if
I
you're
think
watching, yeah,
I think Pranashish has a question.
oh,
You remember Sheila Marsh was very renounced in his life. We all saw that over his lifetime. And I remember when he was talking to the sannyasis, especially the new ones, he told me not to put too much attention to renunciation because it'll make you hard-hearted. And he kept saying that word, don't become hard-hearted through renunciation. The other side of renunciation, which is it's like a dichotomy, is like as I propose saying we have this great desire to feel, to belong, to find our tribe, to have a family, to identify with a group, to belong. Yet we're told no, we have to separate from all material attachments, and where our innate nature is to belong to the village, the town, the club, the family, the school. So our innate nature is to belong, yet we're told to renounce all of these things, to find our true selves. So my ultimate problem is you can only renounce what you already have. If you've never been in a football team, you don't know what it's like not to be in a football team. So do you know what I mean? Like you have to have something, like you have to have your big car to renounce the big car. There's no point saying a poor man saying, oh, yes, I renounce a Mercedes Benz. Have you ever had a Mercedes Benz? No. Well, how do you know? If I give you a Mercedes Benz today and then come tomorrow and say, give me the keys now, you don't need it, you're going to say, no, man, I need that car.
well, yeah, you make some very good points there. There's like five or seven of them. Can't pick it all apart, but uh, that bit about, I looked up Yukta Vairagya before I gave this talk, just to see what it says. And of course, there's all these different devotee sites that define that. But like just looking at the Google search, you know, in about five, search things that come back, right? Rupa Goswami says renunciation will make you hard-hearted. I couldn't believe it came right up. So yeah, that's coming from Rupa Goswami, and it's so true. The good example of this is Durvasa Muni, uh, who turns up in the Mahabharata. He's always showing up at a wrong time and then cursing people. And you wonder, well, why is he always cursing people? You know, uh, I can't remember the story of how he curses Draupadi comes to mind, but it's there. Why is Durvasa Muni always cursing people? Because he's hard-hearted, he's a hard-hearted renunciant. And the thing is, if you renounce the world, then you figure, well, everybody else should be able to do that too, number one. Number two, maybe there's some resentment in your heart because you gave up the nice car and now that guy's driving it. And you're like, damn, I gave up that car. How did I do that? There he is driving it. So there's a certain amount of envy in the heart of a renunciate. It's hard to avoid, but uh, the problem is ego. So you renounce everything. You give up everything, and then you're proud of yourself for doing that. So now you have more ego than before. So all these are different things that play in. Like what you're saying about oh, being part of something or having, you said you can't, how can you give up something if you don't have it, to begin with? And that comes up in a lot of political arguments about, for example, oh, say what they call appropriate technology, where they discover that using a bicycle, for example, it's better than driving a car. So the
Okay.
government will take away your car and give you a bicycle. And so for the people who live in Uganda or somewhere who've saved up all their life to buy a car and find, oh, this is illegal now, we have to ride bicycles, uh, they'll think, wait a minute, this is a different kind of imperialism. You're imposing your will on us. We don't get to have what you had, you
And
know.
never give up the desire of wanting that car one day anyway.
Right, but what Rupa Goswami is saying then, and what is understood in the Krishna consciousness movement since the times of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it's okay to drive a car. Bhakti Siddhanta had a car. So we're not really endorsing the position of the ancient Saint Anthony of Egypt in the desert, living in a cell on a crust of bread. What we're saying is you can be in the marketplace without being of the marketplace.
Yes.
You can engage, it's all right to engage with other people, right? In fact, it's even a good thing. Problem is, you cannot always preach to people. They don't like it. You can't just convert everything into a preaching moment where you're forcing, chant Hare Krishna or die down their throats. That's not going to really win any supporters. For me, I don't know.
Govinda Maharaj told us yukta means practical. What's practical to you? What's practical to the next person? So yukta, renounce what is practical. There's no point giving your car away to some poor man and then tomorrow your wife is sick and you can't drive her to the hospital. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, that's right. So what was the idea of Yukta Vairagya is use things in Krishna's service. But one needs to proceed with caution because some things are not really very yukta, you know, like anger. It was proposed, of course, by Bhaktivedanta Swami. All right, well, you know, you can use your anger in the service of Krishna. Well, be careful with that because it's not such an easy thing to use your anger in the service of Krishna. In fact, you may be carried away and do things that are not Krishna conscious at all, you know. So there are things, lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, and envy. You don't really want to try so hard to use those in the service of Krishna. You want to try to develop uh, certain virtues in your life where you're not being so angry, you know. I don't know. I think it's I think it's good, especially in light of what we were considering about anger. I mean, sorry, loneliness. We were thinking about loneliness, you know. Well, if you listen to other people, you know, if you pay attention to them, and even if you help them, right, you'll find your loneliness diminishing. You'll find that the community will take you in. But it's very difficult. We're living in Kali Yuga. There's a lot of communities that you're not really interested in being a part of. But uh, that's about as much reflection as I can do in a day. Otherwise, it just turns into blah, 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 you know, unless someone else has. Thank you for your
Tapanandini has,
contribution. Yeah, Shivasani.
no, Tapanandini has her hands raised there. So
Oh, I don't see all these things. She has her hands up. Yeah, Tapanandini, what's up?
Well, I was thinking about for what I have experienced is that renunciation for an aspire to devotion like myself, it is that we give up the word mine. This is mine. This is for me. This is for. This will help us to understand our. Well, for me, my real position. I am in need. I need the mercy of my guru. I need the help of Krishna. I need the protection of Sri Simhadev. I need that. That is my real position. Nothing is mine. That is what I have understand in this path until now. Because these teachings are infinite. And I understand that giving up the word mine is important.
All right. Well, I think we'll
That's
let you
it.
have the Hare Krishna. I think we'll let you have the last word. And just before I go, I'd like to give a shout out to all the folks who are watching this transmission uh, as it has been recorded. All you folks out there on YouTube. You know, we're not supposed to attach any petition to our taking of the holy name. We're not to ask Krishna for anything. But as I reflect on the idea of prayer, um, I think it's okay that we can ask the higher authorities um, to help us advance in our spiritual life. If it's a question of becoming more connected with Guru and Gauranga, or if it's a question of uh, becoming more intimate with Radha and Krishna, and developing a more spiritual ego, if you like. I think we can pray for a spiritual advancement. And so, those of you who are watching this, if you're out there, uh, say the prayer for Nazar and for Tapanandini and Advai Krishna and Pranashish Prabhu, and say a prayer for Suvasini Meenakshi Sundaram. Pray for our souls that we can advance in our own spiritual life and on our path towards a higher understanding of Krishna consciousness. Pray for Ganga Leela in California and Tungarasa Dasi in Norway and Hari Priya in Ireland. If you're out there in YouTube land or Internet Landia or, Internet Loca, send a little mercy our way so that we can do this again. And that's my prayer to you all. And Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. I hope to see you next week. And I'm going to say
Mahayogi Prabhu ki
goodbye
jai.
and
Thank
good
you.
luck. Hare Krishna to everyone.
Dandavats, dandavats.
Dandavats, everyone. Thank you so much.
Dandavats. Thank you, Subhasini.
Thank you. Beautiful to see your reflection.
Oh,
Really
yeah.
reflection. Thank you.
Thank you. Very happy to see all. Praying for all, always, Subhasini. Haribol.
Haribol, Haribol.